All right, welcome back to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast. It is some night. I'm not sure what night it is. I think Monday. It's tonight Monday. Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. Okay.
I think it might be Wednesday at this point. We're coming up on Wednesday.
Coming up on Wednesday, yeah. We're potting late night. Tuesday night, we're talking MLB Slate for Wednesday, the 27th. Yeah, the 27th. All right, yeah, I'm getting together. I'm here with John Cabezas, also known as Jay Cabe, however you know him. John, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. How you doing?
I'm making it through.
Yeah.
I'm making it through. Yeah, I had fun at the Braves Boston game. I had the bold call of the day in last night's pod that the Boston Red Sox would help take down some GPPs, and what do you know? Score 11 runs. David Price crushes their bats. Obviously didn't work, so that was pretty fun to watch. And I've had a bunch of people tweet me. I didn't unfortunately get into as many tournaments as I'd like because of travel, but I had a bunch of people tweet me, say that their lineups have been doing well, which is just as good. It's exciting to see.
I'm looking forward to your bold call tonight.
Oh, yeah.
You're running hot. I'm going to have to run with you.
The bold call is going to be good, trust me. Yeah, no, I'll be bold with it. All right, so let's jump into Wednesday. We'll start with Vegas and kind of hit on these, and then we'll get into our pitchers. So it's another Coors Slate. We've just been dealing with these the last several days, and no different this time. So if we're looking at the top teams, Pittsburgh is implied at 5.7 runs. Colorado is at 5.4. Boston is at 5. And if we're looking at the low teams, Cincinnati's at 3, Philly's at 3-1, and San Diego's at 3-3. So, yeah, we were just talking off air, and I do think this is a conversation sort of worth having on the pod for listeners. And something I've been noticing, and I've talked with other FantasyLabs guys about this, and we've been sort of trying to figure out why this trend has existed so far this year. And I'm not really sure the answer, so maybe we can kind of just work through it and see if we can come to any ideas. And it's the trend of Coors batters are really low owned. They've been low owned on DraftKings, they've been low on FanDuel. I know you were saying that Arenado is like 2% owned across the industry tonight, which is just really weird.
It's crazy. On DraftKings, I saw him as at 4.3%, I think it was, in like a $3 GPP, and then he was at 4.4% in the $150 GPP. So, yeah, it's pretty much across the board. And then I went into the live contest to take a look out of curiosity what he was in the 1K qualifier, and he's 2% in that.
Yeah.
And then I can't quite figure out why that is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've been noticing this for a while. Obviously the Colorado Rockies are playing the Pirates now, but this is something I started noticing last week when they were having their series with the Dodgers. I was finding guys when I was in these tournaments where these Dodgers guys were really low owned. I mean, we're talking like the good Dodgers hitters, and really all through that lineup. These guys were just really, really low owned. And even there were some days where DraftKings didn't necessarily get their pricing up to where it should have been. And they were, I guess, appropriately owned or maybe a little bit less. But in these days with their, priced up last year, really in the last couple of years, we've still seen really high ownership, really as it should be, I think. So I'm not really sure what's going on. I mean, would you surmise that maybe people are just kind of over fading them, they're trying to get upside in winning a tournament, so that like the public is just like overthinking it and fading it? Or do you think maybe it's just been weird slates and guys were trying to fit in Kershaw and some of these elite pitchers where it just didn't lend themselves to bats, and maybe it's just a small sample size? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, right now I'm not leaning. I don't think it's that the people are trying to fit pitchers, just because of what you said. There's been so many pricing inefficiencies on DraftKings recently where the Coors guys have been priced down, and I really still haven't seen the ownership reflect that. My best guess would be is that it's kind of coming full circle, whereas there was this edge early on in playing batters in Coors Field. then the ownership spiked, and the new thing kind of became fading that game. And now it's almost like everybody's kind of following along in that, and it might be time to just go back to playing players in that game more aggressively in tournaments. I think that's what I'm going to do. I mean, I've still been really underweight on games in Coors Field, avoiding it for the most part in GPPs, and I'm ready to make the switch and to be a little more aggressive on these hitters going forward. Until it changes, at least. I mean, I don't want to be left behind. If these guys are going to be low owned, I'm going to ride that until everybody else catches on as well.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking elite hitters like Arenado at 2% owned across the industry, it's just so plus EV to roster him, ridiculously enough. So, I mean, even if you have to find value bouts elsewhere or try to fit in other pitchers, if you're getting a guy at Coors Field where we just know that there are so many home runs because of the atmosphere and the weather, is just it 2% just doesn't make sense in any scenario. So I do think that maybe it's just over adjustment from the public, in which case, we're going to talk about pitchers and batters that we like, and we'll do a stack of the day. But I do think it is worth sort of going over, especially at the beginning here, that I think it's a really plus EV move to stack these teams right now. Could that change? I mean, very easily so. It could change really quickly, and I think strategies, especially in GPPs, sometimes change really quickly. But as of right now, as of the time of recording this pod and over the last couple of weeks of observing these trends, I do think it makes a lot of sense to really be heavy on these teams until the public sort of adjusts back to it.
Yeah, and I guess we have to remember, if you're trying to take a contrarian approach to tournaments, which is what I try to do, there is no one way to be contrarian. For a while, fading Coors was almost a guaranteed way to have a different lineup and to be contrarian, but really the essence of being contrarian is being different. Taking advantage of an inefficiency in the way other people are playing. And right now, it looks like the inefficiency is that people aren't, and I feel crazy saying this, but it's that people aren't playing enough batters in Coors Field.
Yeah, which is a really enticing, nice inefficiency. It's a spot to take advantage of, because I mean, there's so much upside built into it, just initially, and if you could potentially get them with an edge of being off the public, that's just it's ridiculous. So yeah, I will be heavy on those teams, as I think you will as well. Okay, let's get into our segments. We'll start with two pitchers that are intriguing. Cabezas, you want to start with yours too?
Sure. The first one I got is Matt Harvey. He's 10.4K on DraftKings, 9.3 on FanDuel. He is a better bargain on FanDuel. He's got an 87% bargain rating over there. But Cincinnati's projected only 3 runs. Mets are currently, well, last I checked, they were minus 215 favorites to win the game. And as we know, just from using the trends tool, I know it's been written a bunch, that pitchers with a money line of at least minus 200 have a plus minus of 5.10 and a consistency of 71.3%, which is huge. But then the other thing that kind of intrigued me about Harvey was that over the past 2 games, his average pitch velocity has gone up 1.1 miles per hour. It's not like he was throwing slow prior to that. That's brought him up to 93.5 miles per hour. So I actually, well, I'll get into that later, as my stat of the day will center around that, so I won't spoil it now. But he's in a favorable ballpark. He doesn't have a great pump for pitchers, so that's a little bit concerning. He's one of the worst in the slate, actually. But his 8.4 K9 is right up there near the top. And for me, he's solid in all formats. My next pitcher is kind of on the other side of things. Stephen Wright, only 6,600 on DraftKings and 6,900 on FanDuel. Which allows for the salary relief necessary to pay up for a guy like Harvey and maybe to afford some of these Coors Field bats that we were just talking about. And not a great whip, 1.3, an average K9 of 7.3. He's pretty much average across the board. But Atlanta's implied to score only 3.6 runs. Their projected lineup has a second worst WOBA in the slate, and their 61-run score on the season is the worst in the league. Granted, I grabbed that number prior to the game tonight, so I'm sure that's changed, but I don't think they bumped up from worst in the league. He's a favorite to win the game. He's actually minus 180 to win. I think a large part of that has to do with the fact that the Red Sox are projected to score 5 runs against Bud Norris. But either way, he's minus 180 to win. At least 6 innings pitched in his first 3 starts this season, each one at least 5 strikeouts. I just think with those and his salary, mainly his salary, and it's just so easy around him, then I'll be targeting him a lot on DraftKings, where he makes it easy to pay up for a second higher price pitcher.
Yeah, that's definitely a good call. My two pitchers, the first guy I'll start with is Jake Arrieta. Not a crazy call here. I think he's the best pitcher in baseball right now. I know that might be offensive to Kershaw and Award Truthers, and those guys are definitely really good. Arrieta, I think, is on that level and just kind of in a special place right now. He's really good. I mean, if you kind of just look at his peripherals, he's got a 0.837 WHIP. That seems pretty decent to me, right?
It's probably a little above average, I'm guessing.
A little above average, yeah. Yeah, so it's just ridiculously good. He's facing a Milwaukee team that's not really scary. If you look at their projected team WOBA, I mean, it's not Atlanta like you're talking about with Wright, but it's certainly in the lower half of teams that we're looking at tomorrow. I don't think Milwaukee's a team that really scares us as far as an offense. And even if it was a tough offense, Arrieta could probably take care of them. So, he's a guy who is an elite whip guy and he's an elite strikeout guy. He's at 9.206 K9. If you're kind of talking about guys who you like to be favorites, he's the heaviest favorite of the slate. He's minus 330, which is like just about as much guaranteed of a win as you could possibly have in betting. So I know he's really expensive. I mean, he's crazy. He has 12.9 on FanDuel. He's actually a bargain compared to DraftKings. So I get he's expensive, and I get it's a Coors slate where you probably want to take those batters, especially after we just mentioned their sort of low ownership. It's going to be hard to fit him in with Coors batters, especially when we think that Coors batters are undervalued, and you should do that. But it's hard to have a slate with him sort of in his form right now and not mention him on the pod. So Arrieta, as usual, is a great play if you want to go that route, especially in cash. The other guy I like is Gio Gonzalez, pitching for Washington. I do think that he has a lot of K upside. He's facing Philly, not a team that really worried about. If you kind of look at their opponent runs, they're projected at 3.1 runs right now. Not a really great offense. Gio is a little priced up. 96 on FanDuel. Let me see where he is on DraftKings. He is 96 on DraftKings as well. So, so he is not a guy that you're really going to get a discount on, like if you're going to maybe go down to Wright, if you're going to try to fit maybe a Harvey, or if you want to really spend up and get Arrieta. It's going to be hard to fit that sort of guy plus Gio. But I do think that maybe if you want to get off Harvey or Arrieta, I think that Gio might be a really nice, interesting option. Obviously, has a good matchup. He is a big favorite as well at minus 200, facing the Philly offense that just isn't any good. He also, speaking of, you had mentioned, the umpire, which I do think is something that a lot of people don't look at. And I think it's kind of a hidden edge. Gio's got a really good home plate umpire. He's got Will Little, who adds 1.2 plus minus to pitchers on average in the last year. So that's a little bump for me as well. Yeah. So I think overall he's kind of maybe not a sneaky play, but really just sort of a nice middle option if you're sort of looking to maybe get off the top guys, but you're a little uncomfortable with the lower ones. Who's your guy to fade?
My guy to fade, and I don't think he's going to be like super high owned or anything, but it's Nick Tropiano. And the reason is that on first glance, I can understand why he may be attractive to people, especially if you just look at him quickly. Angel's a favorite to win. He's got the K upside at 9.2 strikeouts per 9 innings. So when you look at those two things, immediately you just, oh, wow, this guy's got a few things going for him. But, yes, he's the favorite, but barely. The money line is minus 109. It's only a 0.1 run differential between the two implied totals. He does have the high K9, but he's playing the Royals, who have the second least strikeouts in the league. So I think he's just a classic example where if you were to look quickly, he may jump off the page at you where you're like, oh, he may go sneaky, he may be worth taking, when really the upside that's presented on the surface isn't there if you dig deeper into him. So he's an easy fade for me. I'm not necessarily going to the leverage point or anything where I'm going to stack the Royals, but I won't have any Tropiano going for me tomorrow night.
Yeah, good call on that. The guy that I'm going to fade is Marcus Estrada. He's pitching for Toronto against the White Sox. I kind of did the same sort of thing that you did, where I found a particular guy that I think that people might be interested in because of a particular reason. You were looking at Tropiano because of his really high K9 rate, which might interest people. Estrada has a pretty good whip that I think might interest people, especially against a White Sox team that really doesn't scare people as far as hitting the ball. They're typically guys that they don't necessarily strike out a ton. So I think that they're potentially not great for strikeout pitchers, but for whip pitchers, I think they're actually a pretty good matchup for those pitchers. So I think that sort of combination with the fact that Estrada does have a good whip is sort of going to interest people. But then I sort of look at his park rating, which isn't good. It is definitely not a pitcher's park. And then really the thing that has stood out to me is his advanced stats. If you look in the models, it's really bad. I mean, he's got a 21 feet distance differential. Guys are hitting it. Hitting him a lot. He is his speed differential. He's throwing it over a mile per hour slower than usual. Not really good signs there. I'm not sure. Sometimes when you see things like that, you might think that he might be struggling in some ways. Maybe he might be hurt. I really don't know. I'm not going to surmise on that. What I do know is that if I'm looking to get a guy with an elite whip, hoping that I can get a win or something like that in a batter's park, I'm not necessarily going to do that when I see the advanced stats that aren't necessarily in my favor. So not necessarily I think he's going to be like a really, really popular play, but I do think he's going to be intriguing to people, but I am not going to be on him myself. Okay, let's move on to next time. It's going to be two intriguing batters. Cabezas, you want to start with yours?
Yeah, my first elite batter of the night is Josh Donaldson, which you don't even have to say much again about him other than that he's facing a lefty.
Right.
But he is cheaper on DraftKings, much cheaper on DraftKings, $4,800 on DK with an 81% bargain rating. So he offers a lot more roster flexibility over there. He's $4,800 on FanDuel as well. He has everything sets up for him. It's what you would expect when he's facing a left-handed pitcher. He's 395 ISO, 689 slugging percentage. Those are both elite. 9 pro trends. The implied team run total is 4.3, not the best, not the worst. It's about middle of the pack, which I like. When I was actually first looking into him, I was like, and again, it's my initial reaction. I was like, all right, Coors will take most of the ownership. Next might fall on the Red Sox or implied to score 5 runs. On second thought, I don't know if that's going to be the case, what we've seen at Coors. But still, I don't expect him to be crazy overowned with some of the other options at third base. Opposing pitcher, John Danks, 1.71 with 6.3 K9, 1.7 mile per hour decrease in velocity over his past 2 games. He is not a threat, and I'm looking for Donaldson to take full advantage of that. And I'm going to stay. We already kind of talked about him, but I'm going to stay at third base for my next elite guy, and it's Arenado. And it's funny because I looked at his game log in his last 3 games: 0 DK points, 10 DK points, 3 DK points. And I looked at that and I was like, people are gonna get off of him, because I expected that people were on him because he's been at home playing at Coors Field, and perhaps he's burned them, so maybe his ownership percentage would go down. And I kind of was gathering this data as the slate started tonight, and then I go in and I look at my teams, which had him on them, and I see that his ownership was already depressed. And he obviously hit a home run tonight, so I'm hoping that doesn't swing it back. But from what we've seen, I'm not expecting that. And he's just in a plus spot. They're implied to score 5.4 runs, obviously in Coors Field, so it's perfect park factor. He's got a slightly negative WOBA and ISO diffs against left-handed pitchers, but it's really not that big of a deal, and not that big of a deal to me. And if his ownership stays anywhere down near the 5% range where it is, I'm going to keep playing him until the ownership percentage keeps climbing. He is too elite of a hitter in that ballpark to be 4% owned.
Agreed. I think he's too elite in any ballpark to be 2% owned, let alone at Coors. I agree with both of those. My two batters, the first guy I'll talk about is Michael Conforto. We've talked about him before. I think you guys know that I'm definitely a fan. I think he's an elite power hitter. I mean, if you look at his stats, he's got a 271 ISO against right-handed pitchers, 556 slugging. If you look at his sort of recent advanced stats, or if you look at his year-long advanced stats, either one, they're both elite. He's got a 55% hard hit rate. He's crushing the ball. His average batted ball distance is 250. Air time, and like really any advanced stat you look at, you can just blindly pick one, and he's going to be elite. It's just really hard to find a stat that says that he's not an amazing power hitter. He's been really, really underpriced lately. He was at like 3K or lower, and I just have been screaming on pause. I just don't really understand why he was that low, especially moving to the 3 order. We gave the stat last week, and when you and I were on the pod, that the Mets had just been crushing since he had moved up in the order. He's finally increased in price. He's 4K on DraftKings, which I actually really love in tournaments, because I think that 4K mark is still really underpriced for what he should be. But I think the public is going to think that it's too much of a jump. So I kind of look at that as a potential to, hey, okay, maybe guys were potentially going to catch up on or have some recency bias and maybe take a guy who's been crushing the ball, obviously has home run potential, but maybe they'll see the sort of increase in price and maybe stay off of him a little bit. So I think he is still intriguing because of really his upside and his talent. But I also sort of like the increase. I know that's weird to say that you like a guy increasing in price. Usually we don't like that for value. But I actually think the overall value, if you integrate ownership into the factor, I do think that he is actually just as intriguing as he was before.
And negatives can become positives in tournaments in a weird way.
Yeah, they for sure can. Yeah, definitely. The other guy that I think is really intriguing tomorrow, you were talking about Josh Donaldson, just because he's facing a lefty. Josh Donaldson's elite batter against a lefty. He's got a 395 ISO, a 689 slugging. That's really good against lefties, right?
It's pretty good. I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, but let me. What if I told you that there was a guy who hit a 585 ISO and 868 slugging against left-handed pitchers? Would that intrigue you at all?
Yes, that would pique my interest for sure.
That would pique your interest. So I'm obviously talking about Stanton, Giancarlo Stanton, facing a lefty tonight in Kershaw. The Miami team is not very good. He's implied at 3.4 runs because his teammates are awful. He's struggled this year as well, so it's not like it blames entirely on him. His hard hit differential is down 14%. His distance is actually up 4 feet, which I think is interesting. I think Bill actually, one of our writers, Bill Monaghetti, did a post on him earlier this week where it showed that he was actually trending up in the right direction. He's actually had situations in the past where he sort of started slow in April and got things going as the season goes on. So I think that there might be something to that. Honestly, I'm not that interested in that sort of narrative. I do think it's interesting. It doesn't matter to me. Like, the dude crushes lefties. Like, we know that he crushes lefties. I don't know why we need any more sort of like, he's got a 585 ISO against like, he would just have to be struggling so hard, or like a defined injury for me to really not be interested in him against a lefty. I get the Donaldson play. I get that he's cheaper than Stanton. I get that Stanton is 5'4" on DraftKings and a Coors Slate. I get all those factors. I don't care. I don't care. I think he's an elite play, an elite batter, and I'm going to jump on him in maybe low ownership situation. So he's my second guy that I think is really interesting.
Have you been? See, I think a leak in my game so far. I haven't played nearly enough Stanton this year. And actually, I was talking to Bill about him a few days ago, and he mentioned it to me. And I still don't think I ended up playing him. I think he hit a home run. It might have been like 2 games ago or something like that. But it has his own. What's his ownership percentage been like?
Not much, man. Yeah,
because I didn't expect it to be I
So expensive. Yeah, I mean, he's priced like the best batter, which he probably is. He's, I mean, in that Harper range, as far as, home run potential at least. He's just $100 less than Bryce Harper. He's facing a righty. He's more expensive than the guys at Coors. He doesn't have a great park factor tomorrow. Mears not an amazing pitcher, but he's not like the worst pitcher. I'm going to mention a pitcher that I think is really going to be nice to target tomorrow. And when I get to my stack, I mean, there's nothing really that says like, hey, you have to have him tomorrow, which is just kind of how it's been for Stanton. I mean, he's not on a good team.
And on the other side of that, though, there's rarely going to be a situation where it says you shouldn't play Stan.
That's the thing. That's kind of why I love him as a player, especially in fantasy, just because he's sort of just always under-owned where he should be, relative to his stats, just because really everything else that you're weighing in your model or weighing as a player weighs him down. Because if you're going to weigh Vegas runs, if you're going to weigh all these sort of other factors, is going to weigh him down, even though his ISO and his WOBA and all these other stats that sort of identify him as an elite hitter weigh him up. It sort of just kind of puts him in the middle of the model and doesn't stand out. And you're like, why am I going to pay 5.4 for that guy? So I think that's something that maybe the data sort of can miss on it, and maybe just requires a little more nuance and context. I love him, and he's going to be a guy that I take really heavy over the next couple of weeks, because I do think he's starting to hit the ball and see the ball better. So I think that is really something you definitely want to be on the right side of it in tournaments.
For sure.
Cool. Let's keep on moving. Let's do value bats. I'll let you give 2 DK guys, and I'll give 2 FanDuel ones.
All right, the first one, it's kind of coming off this idea of the low ownership at Coors or people underperforming at Coors, and it's Justin Turner, 3,300 on DK, which is just about right at the threshold where we consider him value. But he's projected to bat third, WOBA 387, ISO 199, 508 slugging percentage. He has decent numbers across the board. The Dodgers are implied to score 4.2 runs. Again, that's one of those spots where it's not great, it's not bad. It's not going to push me towards him. It's not going to take me off of him. But the big thing with him, too, is not only is he cheap batting third, but a lot of people just played him. He was severely underpriced when he was playing in Coors. And a lot of people played him, and he didn't perform. So I'm expecting most people having just been burned on him or seeing him underperform in such a plus matchup, that you're also going to be able to get him at a very low ownership. So I like him more as my low ownership filler. Not necessarily as a part of a stack or anything like that, but just filling out a roster spot in a tournament lineup at very low ownership and at a low price. And the other guy that I like, and he's a little above the threshold of value bats, but I had to include him, and that's John Jaso. He's 3,600 on DraftKings, which is much cheaper than he is on FanDuel. It's a bargain rating of 81%. But when you think about it, 3,600 might not come as a value, but he's projected to bat leadoff in Coors Field. And when you look at it that way, I consider it a definite value. Park factors on 100 trillion being in Coors Field. He's applied to score 5.7 runs. And as we know, leadoff hitters, it's a plus spot. They have a plus minus of about a half a run just from batting leadoff. But then when you look at leadoff hitters at Coors Field, those players have a plus minus of 2.53, which is just outrageous. So when you look at those two things and him only being 3,600, I think he's just drastically underpriced for not necessarily the type of player he is, but just for the position he's going to be in his spot in the order and where he's going to be playing. He's an extreme value.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that's definitely a theme of this entire podcast is sort of, what you do with Coors guys relative to their salary, where you think their ownership is going to be. Yeah, I think it's just a really interesting thing to, think about sort of game theory of Coors over the next couple of weeks.
I instinctively want to say that Jaso is going to be high owned at that price tag at Coors, but honestly, this year I don't know.
It's tough to say. Yeah. I mean, it's all of my sort of conceptions are ideas that I've had about sort of projecting ownership of Coors have been really wrong this year. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't feel really confident in projecting ownership for these guys. I'm not sure. My two guys that I think are interesting on the FanDuel side, the first guy that I like is going to Detroit. It's Salty. He is a guy that I think is really interesting just about every day. Really his advanced stats say that he's a really good hitter, especially a power hitter. If you look at his advanced stats, he's got a 54% hard hit rate, which is, the guy that I was just gushing over, and I gush over just about every pod, Conforto is a 55% hard hit rate. Salty is just right there. His 54 is got a distance differential of 39 feet. He's crushing the ball this year, especially. He's got a fly ball percentage of 72%. He is intriguing just because he doesn't hit high in the order for Detroit. Detroit is not necessarily an amazing elite offense. They're projected for 4.1 runs, but they're never a team that's going to be like the highest implied total. So they're always sort of underowned. And he has actually he has negative splits against right-handers, but they're really not that negative. So he's sort of just kind of the same against either players, which I actually think is indicative of actually a talented batter. I think that the more talented batters actually don't have splits against guys. They're sort of a lead against everyone. So I do think that's sort of a positive, but I think people are so dependent on splits, WOBA and ISO splits, that they might see the fact that he is negative tomorrow. Even though if you actually look there, right, so he's negative, but where is he still at? He's still at a 253 ISO, which is considered really, really good. So I think he's intriguing.
I love that call. I've been all over Salty. I've been on the right side of him this year. Yeah. And it's like you said, it's a spot in the order. People don't like going down that low.
Yeah.
But when you consider the way he's hitting the ball and the position he's in, it's a relatively weak position to begin with. So to get him and the way he's hitting the ball at the low ownership he's been coming in at has been profitable so far this year for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's been one of my more favorite guys to roster for sure, especially at a position of it's really hard to find guys at that catcher position. The other guy that I like is Morales. He is, I think, a guy who is also a good hitter. I'm not going to go too heavy into this because I do want to get into our stack and sets of the day. I just think he's really underpriced for kind of where his bat is. He's got a 244 ISO against right-handed pitchers, and he's facing Tropiano, a guy that you said that you might fade tomorrow. So I do think he's interesting. He's got this first base eligibility for KC at LA. So not a great park for batters by any means, but I do think at he's $2,900 on FanDuel, and it's got a 244 ISO and 513 slugging. Even his WOBA is really good. It's got 367 WOBA. If you look at his advanced stats, they're sort of not necessarily like that amazing. They're fairly similar to where he was hitting last year. Not necessarily up, not necessarily down. So kind of just not a super exciting guy. I just think that he's a lot better hitter than $2,900. So I know that's not exciting. I just think that he's mispriced. Sometimes it's just as simple as that, honestly. Okay, let's keep on moving. Just a couple more segments, and then we'll finish this up. Let's go to a stack of the day. You want to go with yours, John?
Yeah. So who I'm running with, this won't be the only team, but one team that's really intriguing to me is the Nationals. And obviously Bryce Harper is the guy you'd be targeting in that stack. But who I also like to include is Jason Worth, who's projected to bat sixth. Most people won't go that far down in the order if he does in fact bat sixth. But his past 9 games, his average batted ball distance is 274 feet, and he has a 48% hard hit percentage. So he's crushing the ball right now. Now they're only implied, well, I say only, they're implied to score 4.5 runs, 4.5 runs, which is good. But when you look at the other implied run totals on the slate, it hardly compares with the game of Coors and the Red Sox at 5. So I'm not expecting too heavy of ownership on them. It's funny because I think last time I was on the pod, I went with a Mets stack, and they were also facing Hellickson, and that's who the Nationals will face this week. And it didn't work out that great with the Mets stack last week, but they did get 10 hits. They did hit 2 home runs, which is unsurprising because Hellickson has no problem handing out home runs to the opposing team. So I'm still comfortable targeting him. And then obviously you got to run Bryce Harper in the stack, the man behind it all. He's still got a 43% hard hit percentage over his past 12 games. 388 ISO against righties, 728 slugging percentage, which is crazy after what we just talked about, because normally you say that Bryce Harper has a 728 slugging percentage, and you're like, whoa. And then you think that Stanton's is more than 100 points higher than that. And when you put that comparison, it just speaks to what you were talking about. But I love him. They have the upside. They're a nice pivot off of the other teams that have higher projected run totals. And I think most of the ownership, even what we've said, is going to fall on the Red Sox, the games in Coors as far as stacks go, and I think they'll go overlooked.
Like it. Yeah, I like the call. Speaking of guys who allow a lot of home runs, John Moscott for Cincinnati, allowing 2.103 home runs per 9. The highest of the slate, and it's like not even really close at all. So that's kind of the reason why I picked my stack. Cincinnati, who facing the New York Mets, team that we have really been on lately. They're projected 4.6 runs, so I do think they're sort of an interesting spot. They are lower than the Coors teams, lower than Boston. So I do think it's sort of interesting. I thought it was interesting maybe to get up to the 4 teams and get up to the next tier. Maybe, what we've been talking about, maybe that's not necessarily the move, but potentially if it was, or just sort of on their own value, I think the Mets are really intriguing. I do think they have a lot of really good power hitters in the middle of their lineup. We've talked about Conforto. Cespedes is really good. Duda has power. Even Neil Walker has been crushing the ball lately. Granderson, obviously. I mean, all of these guys have elite power. And then if you get a guy in Moscow who's just allowing so many home runs, I think that is a recipe for making a huge game. We've been talking about the Mets. I think last time we were potting, they had just gone for like 11 for whatever runs. I think this could be another game where they just have maybe 4 or 5 home runs and really just sort of crush Cincinnati. So, if you're looking sort of a game with not only high upside, but also really high home run upside, as much as a Coors game does, I think maybe the Mets. Okay, let's get to our stat of the day, and we'll finish up with our bold call. What's your stat, John?
So my stat is a trend, really, but it's coming off of like a previously mentioned stat. So I took a look at elite pitchers in the trends tool, and I just set the salary threshold to at least 10K. And then I looked at those pitchers who have had at least a 1 mile per hour positive pitch velocity difference, kind of coming towards Matt Harvey there. And what I found was a plus minus of 3.74 and a consistency of 62.7%. So these are elite pitchers who have seen their average pitch velocity increase by at least a mile per hour have performed very well under those circumstances, which further, actually, I might just roll it straight into my bold call because it kind of goes right with it, which leads directly to my bold call is that Matt Harvey will be on a winning GPP lineup, and he will outscore Arrieta Wednesday night, which is just like, I can't believe I said that.
That is bold. So, so not only just like, not a plus minus outscore, not relative to their salary, just
straight up outscore Arrieta tonight.
I'm going to be honest with you. That's pretty bold. But I like it. Yeah, I mean, that's what the bold call is about. If you're not going to be bold, why are you here? My stat of the day, talking to Matt Adams. He's the guy hits for St. Louis Cardinals. He sometimes hits in the 4th spot of the lineup. We have found out this year that Mike Matheny, the manager of the Cardinals, is kind of crazy and mixes up his lineups all the time. So, we think that Matt Adams is going to play tomorrow. We thought he was going to play today. He ended up not playing. So really, who knows about the Cardinals lineup is the point. No one can project. He's got a different lineup every day. But the point is Matt Adams is super low priced. My stat for him is that he's got an average batted ball distance of 255 feet, which is crazy. He is so low price around the industry, and his advanced stats scream that he is an amazing hitter, at least right now. He's hitting if he does play, he'll hit in the fourth spot for them. So it's just a really good offense, really good hitter. They're probably projected for a lot of runs. Great situation with his low price where if Mike Matheny decides to play him, that's definitely a guy you want to target for sure. And then my bold call of the day is going to be about a guy that we mentioned before, Stanton. I think he's going to fully shake off his rust. I mentioned that Bill had done this study and shown that he had been getting better hitting the ball, a little bit better seeing the ball better. I think that he's going to shake off the rust in the big way. He's going for 2. He's hitting 2 home runs.
Oh, he's going for 2.
Yeah, I know that may not be that bold just because McCutchen went for 3 tonight. So
I think a double dong call is always pretty.
Is always bold. Yeah, but I thought I was like maybe I need to up it to 3, a triple. I don't know. That's way too bold. That never happens. So yeah, I will stick with the double for Stanton. I think that's gonna be my bold call. I think he's due for one. He had 3 in like 70 games last year, which doesn't seem like a lot, but if you're sort of looking at how many double home run games there are just in the league in the history of MLB, 3 in 74 is just sort of a ridiculous ratio for anyone. So definitely think
he's a savage.
Out of anyone, it's definitely possible. But of course, yeah, we have Donaldson, we have Harper, we have a lot of players, including Arenado and McCutchen still playing at Coors. So interesting slate for sure. I think it's going to be a fun one to play. We got Coors, we got a lot of good batters facing the handedness that they like to face. And then we have amazing pitchers in Arrieta and apparently Harvey, who's going to outscore him.
Yep, and then, and it's funny. I think me and you both kind of picked all of our plays before talking and kind of having this revelation around Coors Field. So I am definitely going to be upping my exposure to Coors Field all night.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. We might be messaging each other tomorrow when it's a 1-0 game in the 8th. Being like, why did we do this? But we could be rejoicing as well. So hope it's the latter for sure. Okay, we will end it there. John, thanks for joining us. We'll have you back on in the very near future. And everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Good luck tomorrow on Wednesday slate, and we'll talk to you guys. It will be Jay and Pete on for the Friday slate, and I will talk to you guys next week.